make just a note. To remember the families in El Paso, remember the families in Dayton, and sadly, to keep the Copenhagen family in our thoughts. I don't know whether everybody has heard or not, but Scott Copenhagen was killed, I believe it was Saturday in Iraq. 35 years old, he has a wife and I believe 4 children. So I've been thinking about this. You know, we've been really fortunate in some ways that this war that has lasted so many years has not touched us the way that it has in the last less than 6 months. So I know there's not a whole lot that we can do to ease the pain and the grief of the losses that people in these two communities and that the family of this is experiencing. But I've been thinking and I thought this is really important. The first item on our agenda is the consent agenda, which is a group of items to be acted upon with a single motion and vote. It's designed to expedite the usual and routine matters of City Council. I will ask if a citizen or a council member wishes to have any specific item removed from the consent agenda for discussion, and at that time, either the public or a council member may ask that an item be removed prior to council's vote. The items tonight on the consent agenda are approval of the work session regular meeting minutes of July the 23rd, 2019, approval of the expenditure vouchers for August the 13th, 2019, approval of a renewal fermented malt beverage off-premises liquor license for City Market, approval of a renewal hotel and restaurant liquor license for Once Upon a Sandwich, approval of a renewal hotel and restaurant liquor license for Ocean Pearl Restaurant, approval of a renewal arts liquor license for the Cortez Center, Inc., doing business as the Cortez Cultural Center, and the approval of a special event permit for Mesa Verde Tourism so that they can host an open house from 4:30 to 8 p.m. on Thursday, August the 29th at the Welcome Center. Is there any item that anybody would like to see pulled from the consent agenda?
I don't have any.
I have none.
In that case, may I have a motion, please?
Honorable Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the addition of $95,712.26.
Second.
Lucero.
Aye.
Keel.
Aye.
Betts. Noyes. Levy.
Aye.
Sheik.
Aye. All right, at this time, here's Ben. Ben Burkett is going to give us a finance department update.
Yeah, good evening. This is a new spot for me. The first time in my 7 months being here. So
It's
thanks for having
called
me.
the jury duty.
What's that? Unfortunately, I'm here just because there are some status updates that I just want to make sure I believe most people are aware of items occurring over the last month or so, and I think it would be good just provide an update to council as well as to the wider community. Those 3 things I want to discuss briefly are the discovery of embezzlement by a former employee, 2016 to present audit status, and then finally just a budget. First off is on the embezzlement. Yes, we've just want to acknowledge it that there was a former employee who has embezzled from the city. The CBI, or the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, is involved. I can't go into much detail because it is an ongoing investigation. I do want to provide some assurance, though, is with my start with the city is there were some processes that John, the city manager, and I have already started looking at and implementing, of which some of those controls have already been implemented to further improve the financial management and administration of city assets. The other thing is that John Doherty and myself have been in contact with, briefly with the CBI as well as our insurance organization, CIRSA, and just trying to move things along. CIRSA we've asked them to provide a forensic auditor as soon as possible. So, we're trying to be very proactive and keep things moving. Now, The impact of the embezzlement onto the 2016 to present audits is, unfortunately, I believe, going to slow us down pretty dramatically. We were very close to having our 2016 audit completed, but with the fraud that has occurred, we decided to open up that year and look at it in more detail. We've also had some, from the 16 to present audits, just record corrections that we need to do from just general accounting and bookkeeping. But the CBI has instructed us for now is do not do any cleanup of any activities for initial evidence purposes. So that puts a delay on the audits even further, and I just want to make everyone aware of that. I have no time frame of how long the investigation will take. The expectation is it'll take a while. As we know more, we'll definitely provide further updates in the future. And then finally, on the budget, we have started on our 2020 budget, and we had a great meeting last week for the budget retreat with council, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of you who are there. It was great. It was very positive, and I think it was a good outcome. We are working to have the budget done more timely as compared to years past. And then our goal is to have a GFOA, or Government Finance Officers Association, budget award. And basically what that signifies is we are following best practices with how we budget and manage funds within the city. Yeah, so that's just a brief update for you.
Ben, let me ask, I know that CBI has some other issues that they're addressing that obviously they feel are more important than our particular circumstance, but I'm wondering if they actually realize the ramifications of putting this off too far to us and our financial health. Is there something, John, that you can do, or contacts that can be made to kind of let them know that this is serious too, and that they're putting us in a position where we can't really move forward until we get them on board, and maybe apply a little bit of a pressure to get them to, I'm not suggesting they table a murder investigation, but I just wonder if they realize the seriousness of the situation here as well.
Ben and I talked earlier today, and if I don't hear from the inspector by this Friday, we will call him. They can at least get their forensic auditors rolling. He doesn't need to be here for that, so we will stress to him that I recognize you're working on a murder right now and other things will come in between, but can we get this moving as quickly as possible? And do we have to wait for you to do yours before they can do theirs?
Would a phone call to the state attorney general bear fruit?
I think we better refer to the chief, because I don't think that'd be a very good idea, because I don't want to make them mad.
Chief.
I don't want to make Chief mad either, but I'm just curious.
I think they've got wrapped up with their homicide.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking he'll be down here for long. He understands the seriousness of it.
Yeah.
He's an excellent investigator. So, if Councilor John, you need to talk to him, I'd be fine. I think John probably is.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious if that would help expedite the process or not. I haven't.
They don't work for the attorney.
Right. Okay.
They work for the head of CBI. He was police chief in Grand Junction for years, so they understand.
Right. Okay. Great. Thanks, Chief.
All right, thanks. So does council have any questions of Ben?
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben, for coming. All right, at this time, citizen participation. And I know we have somebody that would like to speak to the council, so if you would come to the podium, be sure that you push the button so that it becomes green instead of red. We need your name and your address, please.
Brandon Johnson, representing MVIC General Manager. I'm here today to talk about the little parcel of property that's south of Tucker Lane along the ditch bank, and it joins Empire. I think from Empire to the existing Green Gate is the city's, but the parcel that's in question's after the Green Gate up to Tucker Lane. Linda made a few copies of some of the correspondence I received, and they're from the landowners that are butt up against this parcel of property on the county map. It says no man's land, no one owns it. So I'm here today to try to ask you guys or whatever. MVI has the easement through there, but it's an easement only. We do not own the property, just the easement. We've had motorcycle complaints up and down there. There's been fires back there. There's been traffic through there. Vandalism's been happening. It's hard to, one, file a police report, which I have almost every year on our infrastructure that's there. But it's hard to do when you don't have who the property owns to. So bring it to your attention. Hopefully we can resolve something. You can see 2 letters on there that I got from the folks that live around there. Everyone's blaming it on everyone else. It's just, I mean, we need to figure out who owns the property or what we got to do or something there.
John, would you like to maybe just share?
Yesterday, the mayor and I met with one of these ladies who complained, and we were out there, and today I asked the police chief, because we narrowed it down a little bit on when the worst times are and things, and they said after school. So I asked the chief just to have somebody there shortly after school and then just before dawn to see if they can't catch them really revving these bikes up, really noisy and not caring who's on the trail and just running crazy out there. And right now that's essentially all we can do, because he's right, it's a no man's land and nobody owns it, so there's nobody to say they can't be trespassed or anything else. So we're essentially doing everything we can at this point, but it's pretty lawless out there.
So I might make note of as you're driving through there, we do daily routines up through there. The motorcycles, you can see they have trails, I would say, to the northeast of the place. And I'm sure they're driving on someone's land there, because it looks like just the strip of the ditch bank is the no man's land. So that might be an option too, to see if the adjacent landowners or something want to whatever. And we have no problem put a gate up there, but then once again, it interferes with walking. I mean, it's just one thing after another. Well, I'm used to the yelling, so thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mike, just let me ask a question. If it's a the area that's a no man's land that doesn't belong to anybody, we don't have any ownership, since it's within the city limits, it does pose a safety hazard in the sense that there are lots of weeds and things there that are potential fire hazard. Can the city assume ownership of that if it's not owned?
For those of you who, and I think maybe it would be Ty and Orly would remember, it would be a similar process to what we did for the flaws up at the end of Tucker Lane when we did the quiet title. It can be done. Other councils have blinked because they didn't want the expense of maintaining a trail and being responsible. It's a major budget issue, potentially, because suddenly you've added to your parks, and you're going to have to maintain it, you're going to have to police it, you're going to have to, we don't, you know, I think we started back with Jay Harrington, when we talked about it, and it'd be something to have on the, what do you call it, either an executive session to discuss the legal parts, or just a workshop to go over it in general. But It would be a major expenditure, and then there's a couple people who claim to own land across the ditch bank, which creates some issues because they want large amounts of money for their pieces of real estate. And so we could get ownership of all but those parts, and so the trail technically would end and they could trespass and then start on the other side and away we go. We've come close to, like I say, doing it, but then people started talking about the overall costs, and it's something you need to sit down and look at and make a decision one way or the other.
Couple things. It's been brought to the city's attention on more than one occasion.
I can't hear you, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's been brought to the city's attention on more than one occasion that kids could get hurt because of their driving, and when you go out there, there is a lot of fuel, a lot of weeds. Now, this season may not be an issue, but if we'd had a season this year like we had last year, that's just tender for a fire. In fact, they had a fire, what was it, a year and a half ago, that fortunately the fire department got out there and got it out, but it could have been pretty devastating. Yes, I'm sure there are costs associated with it, but I guess what would be the cost if we had a fire that burned down several homes, or we had a child that was killed? It's, you know.
Well, I'm not saying, you were talking on one hand just about ownership and how we would get there and what that would mean. My understanding is under the former manager, we had gone in and cut down dangerous trees. We had done some mowing. I don't remember whether it was Parks and Rec or Public Works. We can continue to do that. Again, it's a monetary expenditure. If you have the money to do it, you can go do it, and we can just continue on. We're exercising control over it, so in some ways we are letting everybody know it's ours. So it's not a bad thing. It's just, can you afford to do it? And then to what extent do you want to take over control? The little bit of history, when they tried to do this back in the 80s, as I recall, there was World War III. All the residents hired some attorneys. They pretty much didn't want a trail in the back of their houses because if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of neat. You can walk along and look down in everybody's backyard and see what everybody's doing. And so they didn't want a lot of public invading their privacy. And so the move, I think Chris Burkett was the director of Parks and Rec at the time, it sort of stonewalled. The council at the time thought there was too much anti-trail. We can do it, it's just, can you afford it? To maintain it, turn it into another piece of park. What's it going to take? That's.
I'm not suggesting that it be turned into another piece of park. I'm just wondering and I'm just throwing this out for consideration. Is it something that we should look into? If there was some way for us to claim ownership, then we have the right to be able to go in and do something with weed control, post signs, and maybe insist that owners maintain that property in a fire-safe manner.
Well, yeah, we can go in and just maintain it as it sits right now if you want. We have in the past, to some degree. I think Mr. Hale and Phil might be able to better enlighten you, but we did some remedial firework back in there. We removed some trees. Just because everybody was using it and nobody else was stepping up to do it. That would be something to talk about in the next few weeks when you're thinking about what you want to do.
Yeah, she's saying we know that we can go in and maintain it. Since it's vacated land, can we take possession of it?
It's not vacated land, it's owned by a company that may or may not be in existence anymore. It's a company that was one of the original irrigation companies that came through that was an MVI predecessor. MVI when they took over, it was my impression, and I've got a box of all this research and title work from when we did the flaws.
But if it's been land that's been vacated for a certain amount of time and there's been no upkeep on it,
We would have to go to court and do a quiet title lawsuit and show that we had control over the land for a certain period of time, and that we deserve to own it, or that it was some sort of a, and this may or may not work because the law keeps changing, but that it's a public way, a trail to a certain extent. And so we could go in and say, okay, it's been used for 20 years, if I remember correctly, and so we can turn it into a public trail. That's not the problem, and the fact that we don't know for sure who owns it, or if that company's still in existence or has a successor or whatever. They didn't answer the last time I sued them. We published in the paper and everything. And it would be the same process we did with the flaw to get Tucker Lane when we did a quiet title up there. And so we would name the other people that might have an interest and see who answered. Like I say, there was only one or two pieces of property that were straddled the ditch, but the rest of it, I don't anticipate a lot of problems, but I don't think they did either back in the 80s when they wanted to do it, early 90s.
Well, I'm not mentioning a trail. I'm just wondering if this would ease the public's burden if we were proprietors of that piece of property.
You know,
I have no interest in creating another park system or a trail system that would,
If you wanna-
impose more friction. I'm just saying I'm just wondering, would it ease, ease this problem if we were owners of the property and all we did was mow it? No trail system, nothing like that.
like I say, we've been doing it without owning it, so I don't know that it would ease the problem to own it or not. I mean, I can't, if we just want to go in and
We
mow
could put
it.
up more barriers, close something off, so on and so forth.
If it was for public safety, we could take that argument, and it's sort of no man's land. If you want to own it, we can own it and do it. If you want to try and do it without owning it, I think it's, we're trying to preserve public life, public health, wealth, and safety.
Does that give us a greater ability then to be able to put up signage and say, motorized vehicles it's against the law for motorized vehicles to be on this bank?
We could put up the signs, but enforcement might be difficult.
And I know how that works, yeah.
I mean, just the fact that we have signs up there, okay, what did they commit? You would have to own it in that sense. It would have to become a city park or a city-owned piece of property subject to rules and regulations of whichever department had it, and then we could write tickets into Muni Court for violating those regulations. I think there's a section that allows us to do that. And so it's doable. It was kind of, I have to admit, surprisingly easy when we did it out on Tucker Lane. I don't know if it would still be as easy. Technically, you would need to do all the way to Montezuma. That ditch bank down in there is also no man's land. So if we were going to do it, my recommendation would be from Montezuma all the way up as far as we need to go. And get the title quieted and see what happens.
Mike, we own the property up to the gate that Brandon spoke of, and then there's a parcel probably 200 feet north of that was donated to the city. We do own that. About half of this, what you're talking about between Empire and Tucker, is in the city, that we own, city property.
And I'd have to go back and look at my title work, but I'm not going to argue, I don't know.
Well, I'm not arguing, that's just the way working with Doug, GIS and whatnot,
There was some mistakes made on some of those maps that I found when I did the title work, is what I'm trying to say, delicately without.
Fair enough.
It was called a city trail and some other things, and it wasn't when I did the title work. So I'm not clear. The only part I know that is in the city's ownership is what we quieted title to, which was the former Flaw property up in there somewhere. And I'd have to go back and clean that all up and see, and look.
Phil, Phil, does the city then, on that stretch of property that we own, do you regularly or periodically?
We mow it.
cut
We've
those-
actually brought in a crane. A couple years ago, we had to hire a crane to
get
drop a cottonwood that was probably 5 or 6 feet in diameter that was standing dead, and it would have fallen and destroyed homes. So, yeah, we've gone up there, taken large cottonwoods down. We mow the right-of-way that we do, is my understanding that we own. And we have gone in off-grid, out of the city, where you're talking about where those trees burned about 3 or 4 years ago, and we've laid those down and reduced fuels, working with the budding owner, the Hooten Enclave, which is that county chunk of property in the city. We've worked with that landowner, as well as any of the people in that area to get those fuels mitigated.
Just seemed like there were a lot of, just a little stretch, there were an awful lot of weeds and things that had grown up because we've had so much moisture this season that we had a great crop of weeds. So I didn't know whether that was, whether you had a regular schedule for mowing in that section or
Well,
not.
it's all based on, precipitation and moisture. I mean, if it's dry and we hit it once and it doesn't get wet again in the summer because it's been so dry, we don't have monsoons, they don't grow.
Yeah, okay. All right, well,
Well, on this letter, it says it's basically one family and their friends that are causing this problem with the motorcycles. Could we contact that family and maybe talk to them? Would that be a possibility? Not sure who I'm addressing it to, but I'm just throwing it out there.
According to the neighbors, the police have talked to him.
Okay.
And the neighbors have talked to him. The parents have been up there on a bike and they talked to him. And his comment was, "This is my time with my kids, so out of my way."
Okay. We've tried.
and so if the city doesn't have ownership, then we can't do anything. So, hence the question about taking over ownership
Yeah.
of that if nobody else owns it.
Well, there's one avenue that I haven't really thought about and looked at, but I suppose we could look and see if we could create a fire life safety ordinance about use up there, even though it's not owned, and I'd have to do some research and see what we could do. And then shut it down, like Mr. Johnson was talking about. Gates, whatever, it's no longer a walking trail, it's no longer anything. It is truly no man's land.
Is it owned or is it not
It is owned.
by us?
No, it's not owned
Some
by
of it's
us.
owned by
I
us.
disagree with what the GIS guy said because I got into it with him back when he published the map before Phil was here. And I said, there's some mistakes here. I would have to go back and verify that again. This is just memory talking. There is some chunks up by Tucker Lane we do own. There was some stuff going on with the Hootens that Mr. Hale had been working on, and I don't know how that all went, but we don't own that much of it. If you look, like I say, it's all the way from Montezuma up to Tucker Lane is what we're talking about. And so if we're going to do it, I'd have to go back and update my title work, make sure it still says all the same things we had, and then come on down the ditch and figure out who had to be a defendant.
So
and
we
who didn't.
visited this before,
Yes, sir.
and what was the outcome of that?
Nobody wanted to do it because they thought it was going to cost too much money.
But you've done the research already.
I've done most of it. I'd have to go back, and it's been actually done twice. And both times, the litigation started to look expensive because of the possible defendant's reactions.
But we don't even know who that defendant is.
Yeah, we do. It was some of the landowners.
Oh, but we're not,
You were just stating that they never even got back to you when you ran the ad in the paper.
The landowners who currently own the land alongside the ditch.
Okay.
And
This
the
is
guy
getting
that owned the
confusing.
land in the ditch.
Okay.
That's where we got. There was actually, part of the fight was about changing the zoning or something to allow for the trail to be on there, and that created a huge hue and
Okay.
cry.
So what's our next best step? How do we
Let me
expedite
figure out
this?
if we can just pass an ordinance to close the ditch bank off to all use, and if you're caught up there, it's a violation in the Muni court.
I think that may be overkill.
to do it at one spot, you got to do it at the rest of the place in the month.
Pardon?
I think that's, the concern is fire safety, and the concern is kids out on motorized vehicles that are riding them in a reckless manner, and they're also riding motorized vehicles that could spark potential fires in the area.
I can research that as well. It complicates things. When you do things blanket, nobody, it's easier. When you start picking people who can use it.
But that's not in the best interest of our citizenry, I don't think, to do it as a blanket
I
thing.
can't hear you, ma'am.
That's not in the best interest of our citizens to do it in a blanket manner in this case. I mean, yes, I can understand why it would be easier to do it that way, but then it's going to deprive those people who use that as a hiking trail, who walk their dogs, who take their babies out for a stroll, who aren't going to start a fire and are not probably going to be a danger to others using that area, to deprive them of the opportunity of being able to use it because it's easier is, I'm not sure that's a strong
May I be
argument.
authorized to update my research and see what I can come up with for other solutions?
John?
Are you asking me or the council?
Well, I'm at this end, so.
I know, you got a lot of people to go through to get to me.
I'd like to see what happens when you have more cops out there, more patrolling, just to see, if something can happen with that before we get too involved in, I mean, we've already pretty involved in it as it is, but, if we see what happens with that, and go from there, and who knows, that might be something that will spark their attention and they'll decide maybe we're not gonna do this.
Do we want to put a time limit on that?
Well, like within a month's time?
Yeah, or 2 months or whatever. What would be reasonable to, because you're right, I mean, if that solves the problem, why, that would certainly be the easiest route. How long is it just open-ended? When do we come back and readdress this, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think 30 days, maybe. I don't know. But it just seems like if it's something that we could do in-house, so to speak, pretty simple. And it might help and it might not.
Chief, does that shorten us in other places on patrol?
Well, we'd have to do it on an as-call basis. Not people to sit out there
Right.
all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
It's impossible. But the call, what we're trying to do now is in the times when there's complaint boards, now the school started, we have a little better time frame.
Right.
After school.
Okay.
We'll hit it, but, you said that way with the motorcycle riding, accidents somewhere.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
We'll do what we can.
Right.
I know it's a problem. It's been a problem for 30 years.
Yeah.
So should we come back and reevaluate this, at our September meeting, our first September meeting, and see if we've had any, maybe we can touch base with the people who have expressed some concerns and see if there's been any reduction, and
Yep.
is everybody amenable to that?
That sounds good.
Okay, all right, good, thanks, Roy. Bob?
No. It's very, it's a history lesson, too.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bob Wagoner. Thank you for your time. I live on South Madison Street, 7 or 8 blocks from the old high school site and the new park. And I have a suggestion or an idea that I would like to put on the table regarding that new park. And the idea is a band shell. A band shell. I think all of us know that going to a band concert in the park in the summer is about as Americana as apple pie. The trouble is, Cortez doesn't currently have a place for a band concert in the park. Now, you might be thinking we've got that sort of concrete stage that's south of the swimming pool. And that works if you're an electronic band and you have amplifiers to drive your loudspeakers to 100 decibels and cover up the truck traffic going down Main Street. But I'm not talking about an electric band and amplifiers. I'm talking about a band with flutes and clarinets and trombones and tubas playing Sousa marches. That's what a summer band concert in the park is all about. And you might be thinking, well, aren't you a little late with this idea? Because I know that the planning for that park space down there has progressed. And if you're thinking that I'm late, you're right. The fact is, this idea just occurred to me when I played a band concert in Durango on the 4th of July. And I don't know if you all know where Rotary Park is in Durango. It's sort of where the Main Street and Highway 550 come together at the north end of town there. And Rotary Park is just off to the east there. And they have a thing called a bandstand there. It's like a gazebo. And to be honest, it's a terrible place to play. As a band member, you can't hear what the other members of the band are playing. And worse, my wife was in the audience, and she said when the band played softly, she couldn't hear anything. So I want to make a distinction between a bandstand, which is typically just an open-sided gazebo, and a band shell, which is an acoustically engineered space that helps the performers hear one another and projects the collective sound out toward the audience. If you'd allow me, I brought a couple of pictures of, if you would just look at them and maybe pass them down. The first one is a band shell in Colorado Springs. It's a gorgeous thing. It was built in the 1940s. It's truly an elegant structure. And I'm not thinking of that for Cortez. That's way more than we need. That was back in the before television. So if the band got together and played a concert, everybody went. And that's what was going on at that time. Now, here's another one substantially less elaborate than the one that I passed down first. This is in northwest Wisconsin, and I've played in this band shell. It's big. The Duluth Symphony, which is 75 pieces, plays there every summer to open the concert series. And there's plenty of room in that band shell for the Duluth Symphony. The acoustics of that building are superb, both from the standpoint of the players and the audience, which you can see is a pretty good-sized group of people. Now, the third picture I have is probably the ultimate in simplicity of a band shell. This one is also in northern Wisconsin, and I played there actually a couple dozen times. It's pretty good acoustically, but it's fairly small. The band that I was in was 40 members, and we pretty much filled that one up, although the idea could be done on a somewhat larger scale. So that's why I'm here, is I want to get this idea into the conversation about that park, because it would be a great asset to our community to have a place for summer band concerts. And if you have questions of me, I don't know am I running out of time, Karen? I don't know.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
close to the end.
Okay, well, if you have, I've sent a letter to the paper about this, and I urged citizens, if they have thoughts one way or the other on this, to contact you folks and let you know what they think of the idea of a band shell. And I'm available if you have questions.
How big is your band, Bob?
Well, the band that I play in Durango is about 60 to 65. It varies a little.
No, the Cortez community.
The Cortez band, Paul.
Four Quarters Community Band.
Right.
25 members.
25. I understand you're playing this Sunday.
I can't understand.
You're playing this Sunday, right?
We're playing on Sunday.
Yeah, okay.
Right in front of the south of the swimming pool.
Okay.
The area that he referenced.
Yeah, okay.
2 o'clock.
Yes, I know.
Bring your chairs.
I'll be there.
Other questions, anybody?
Thank you for,
I have none,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Whiteman. Thank you.
appreciate that. All right, we have no public hearings, we have no unfinished business, but we do have new business. Renewal of professional services contract for GIS services for Doug Roth. Phil.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm here to ask for you to renew Doug Roth's annual contract. He's been doing this work for us since 2014, working 10 hours a week, 2 days a week, and I've heard nothing but good things from all the departments that he works with and supports, and of course I feel the same way, obviously. We've only had one rate increase for his weekly hourly rate, and I think that was 2 years ago. He's not asking for one now at all. So I'm just bringing this before you to allow John to re-sign and get Doug back on for another year. Great.
And I will also say that Doug is working on the 2020 census. He and I are co-chairing a committee for the county, and he's been really nice to work with.
Yes.
Questions, council?
I have none. I'd like to approve the renewal professional service contract for GIS services with Doug Roth,
I second
doing
that.
business as Cortez GIS Services, to be effective September 1st, 2019 through August 30th, 2020.
I will second that.
Noyes,
Aye.
Keel,
Aye.
Betts, Levy,
Aye.
Lucero,
Aye.
Sheik.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the extension of 7th Street. John and Chad.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you. I'm Chad Hill, the city engineer. In your council package is a memorandum that I drafted for you. The concept of extending 7th Street from South Sligo to County Road 27 has been around for many, many years. It would be roughly 2,500 feet, about half of which would be within city right-of-way. The primary driver would be to help the bus traffic. Right now, a lot of the bus traffic has to exit onto westbound Main Street off of 27th, which is difficult due to the traffic volume. CDOT has indicated that they're going to install a signal light there next year. We don't know for sure if that'll actually happen. Montezuma County has prepared a preliminary design. That design was delivered to Public Works in June. We were unaware that they were doing that. Then there was a work session held July 30th jointly with Montezuma County, and this was a topic of discussion. And throughout that discussion, there were different options on cost share, maintenance, phasing of the work, the design criteria for the road, for the city portion of the road in particular. And an outcome of that discussion was a further review of the plans that the county had prepared. I've reviewed them, and we discussed this in the meeting at that time too, in the workshop, but their design does not meet the city design criteria, and that was discussed, and they've agreed to reevaluate the design that they put forward. Another condition was a desire to prepare a geotech report to establish the design criteria for the new road, and they've also agreed to do that. And another consideration that I think is really important to Public Works is that the road as prepared right now at this 30% design would have a gravel surface all the way through from Sligo to 27th. And the city has been working, and we currently have a project right now to eliminate gravel roads within the city. And so we would require any portion of the road within the city right-of-way to have an asphalt surface. And in that discussion, and it was a general discussion, the county agreed to that as well. Because of the high traffic volumes with buses on a gravel road in the winter, in the spring, when it's dry, when it's wet, would create a nuisance for the city in carrying mud and debris onto the city surface, paved surface. So I prepared a cost estimate that's also in your package. And there's two options that I looked at. The first option is if we put this project out to bid for general construction for the city portion, which is like 1,250 feet, we develop based on unit costs from projects that we have bid this summer, that cost would be roughly $400,000. So it's considerable. That would be for a 32-foot wide paved surface, no curb and gutter, no sidewalk, just the road. In the discussion, the county indicated that they self-perform, and we see this all the time, they self-perform considerable road work throughout the county. And part of the work could be done by county forces. So I looked at that cost estimate and assumed some of the elements would be performed by the county at no cost to the city. I don't know if that's really agreeable, and we'll get to that shortly. But so I reduced the cost, just assuming that particular elements would be constructed within city right-of-way by the county. And that cost then reduced down to about $290,000. And in my recommendation, I think that we should continue to vet this concept. I understand the need for connectivity, but there's the budget constraints. This is not in our budget for next year or any future budget. It is in the future city streets master plan, but it's not scoped or scheduled. And so what I'm recommending to the council is that the city staff and the county staff work to further vet what work could be performed by the county, revise the cost estimates, phasing, and there could be other options included, I don't know. And I've discussed this with the county administrator just before this council meeting. We're going to try to meet tomorrow. If the council would vote to approve that we continue to vet this, or whatever you so decide to do.
Well, we did have a discussion at the workshop. Are there any additional questions or comments that council would like to make on this?
I don't have any.
In that case, may I have a motion?
The Honorable Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to table this for further vetting till the meeting is set between county and city.
I second that.
Betts? Aye. Noyes?
Aye.
Lucero?
Aye.
Levy?
Aye.
Keel?
Aye.
Sheep?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Phil. We have no draft resolutions or ordinances, no other items of business. At this time, is there any citizen that would like to address council? Okay. City attorney has no report. City manager, John.
I have a couple things. One, to let council know that the city, with our partners Osprey and Empire Electric, did get the electric vehicle charging grant. So we were moving forward with that. And then I will elaborate more on my weekly report, but the airport reported that year over year, we are up 3% in ridership or boardings, but it's trending down over the last 2 months with the schedule changes that were implemented, that at least the first one in the morning is now going to Telluride. And if you're boarding in Cortez, you got to get 2 tickets. Yeah, because they can now consider it Cortez to Telluride, Telluride to Denver, so it's 2 different legs. You have to get off in Telluride and get back on. So that's liable to hurt us. We had 155 landings compared to 97 over the first 6 months of last year. So we are up in the number of landings, which means more revenue, but the passengers aren't leaving here, they're leaving empty here to go to Telluride primarily. Because I booked a flight 2 months, 2.5 months ahead of time, there was 1 seat available at 6 a.m.
Well, basically, if they're charging 2 tickets, who wants to pay 2 tickets to go to Denver?
Unless you picked a different time later in the morning,
Well,
and then
yeah,
it's hard to connect flights when they're late and not on time. And
How many of their flights daily are doing that?
Pardon?
How many of their flights are doing that?
2, I believe.
the two earliest flights?
I know what the 6 a.m. one is, and the next one, I believe, goes direct, and then the next one is again to Telluride to Denver.
Our contract with Boutique address anything of that nature? Or is that just a nifty little loophole that they invented?
They told Russ that this was an advantage for us because then we would get those boardings.
I'd like to see them sketch that out.
We're not getting the boardings because they're not boarding here.
Can you have a conversation with him about that?
We can try.
This is not panning out, and that we may actually be losing passengers, because if I have to buy 2 tickets and have the inconvenience of stopping in Telluride when I would just like to be able to go to Denver, that's not an advantage for me. That's a gross disadvantage. And if I need to be in Denver for a 7 o'clock meeting or something, or 8 o'clock or whatever it is, I'm going to drive to Durango, which doesn't help us one bit.
Exactly.
Can you have a conversation with them?
I can have a conversation. Russ isn't overly happy with them.
I'm sure he's not.
Their flights are getting late. They're getting canceled more and more often. They do not have the planes and pilots to run their schedules that they've set up.
But the Telluride thing wasn't in, like Ty was saying, that wasn't in the agreement we agreed with, correct?
Correct.
Because I thought it's one stop, Denver.
According to our contract, isn't that what it says?
I don't know what the contract says, honestly.
Or is it, yeah, maybe not that specific, but...
Well, the federal agency that approves that for essential air service,
Right.
are they agreeing to this?
I would
And
say
do we have
apparently.
any say?
We were informed, that's all.
Well, yeah, but I mean, as the airport, do we have any say in that?
I would say no, because Russ wasn't happy about it. I will work with Russ and see if we can't run it up further than just Boutique to get back to where we were. That they're now hardly providing service out of here at all. They're just letting them sleep here and or putting their planes here overnight and taking off in the mornings.
Gonna have to charge them rent then, huh? To make up for the boardings.
Because they don't fill up here anymore. They fill up in Denver or something, and so they don't even use our aviation services.
Oh, so they're not even using that anymore, huh?
Very little.
When is that contract up?
I would have to look, I don't know.
Well, actually, we extended it though, didn't we?
I believe fairly recently.
Yes, we did. We didn't extend it on the basis of this. I don't know how much leverage that gives us, but that wasn't the agreement.
No, Boutique owes us some answers, and I think that
so,
it
too.
is the only fair thing for the city that they honor, at least giving us a conversation and justifying what they're doing. It's almost borderline, in my opinion, fraudulent, and I don't agree with it.
Well, they were encouraging us to do a multi-year contract, were they not? Wasn't that to their advantage to have a multi-year contract?
I believe so.
Well, this is not what we agreed to for a multi-year contract, so.
I'll let them know that they're slipping back into Great Lakes territory now.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least they.
I'm familiar with them, so.
Russ may not be happy, but telling the council's not happy, and maybe that will carry more weight. I don't know that it would, but. Okay. Any other good news?
Well, my last, was get the mayor of Cortez water bottle, so.
Oh, okay.
What was that?
All righty, give me a water bottle. All righty, city council meetings. Where have you been?
See, last night, the Parks and Rec had a new neighborhood park barbecue over at the site of the old high school, and it was well-attended. There's over 50 people that showed up, and a lot of the people just walked in from their residence, from that neighborhood, and that's the people we're serving out in that area eventually. And there's a lot of excitement about the park, and they we're asking when it was going to start, and we served burgers and hot dogs, and the people were really receptive to the hospitality that we served. we had display boards, and we're explaining how far the construction design has progressed. Pinion Project had some kid activities there. They had blocks of wood to make towers, and the kids were able to play with the blocks while the parents were talking to the staff members and the Parks Rec people. And I'd also like to give a big thanks to the Parks and Rec staff and the advisory board members who showed up. Thanks to Mayor Sheik and John Doherty for showing up and helping unload the tables and stuff. And especially, I'd like to thank Peyton A. Heitzman. She's done more than her share of work in situations like that. You know, she just gets in there and moves stuff around and tells us where to go and what to do. And we appreciate you, Peyton. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to add to that too. Mike, I was thinking about it yesterday. It's quite a job when the Parks and Rec decides to do something like this. You know, they have to drag out the grill, somebody has to go to the grocery store. They had two canopies that they had set up, they had tables, they had chairs that they brought in. It was a lot of work getting it set up, and then a lot of work getting it torn down, taking it back to the shop, unloading it, putting it away. And you know, it would have been really easy just to say, oh well, we don't have a whole lot to report, so we just won't do it. And so I'd like to commend the Parks and Rec staff for their willingness to do that and to keep the community in the loop on this project so that they know what forward progress we're making. Because that's a lot of work. All staffs to be complimented. Have you been to a cultural center meeting?
No, not yet.
Okay.
That's coming up. I did go to the back to school bash last Thursday. I just happened to be on my way somewhere else, and I drove down Montezuma, and I said, wow, is it third Thursday already? I think John Doherty had the same idea. There's hundreds of people, cars parked all over, and it was the Montezuma Early Childhood Council and the Salvation Army, and the city hosted a Fill a Backpack program. We gave out over 500 backpacks full of school supplies and all different age groups. You know, they had preschool backpacks and up to high school backpacks. And they had, you know, like I say, over 500 backpacks given away. They were giving out socks. They were giving out balloons, haircuts for the kids, you know, and it was really well attended. People in the community really knew about this, and they showed up, you know, in mass, and it was very, very well attended. So it's really a great thing to see this happening in our community. You know, we're serving the people with kids, you know, and helping out the families, you know, and I really commend these groups that are doing things like this. So my thanks, and the county and the city, thank you.
Ty? No, you haven't, because you're back at work. Sue, has anybody else been to a meeting? All right, John and I went to the Southwest Colorado Council of Governments meeting last Thursday. Basically, they spent time talking about their budget. Broadband, bringing us up to date on broadband. San Juan County and Farmington are really interested in what the COG's been doing as far as broadband is concerned. And they actually have given us some funding to participate in that. Cybersecurity was an issue. They probably the area that was of most interest was at the San Juan. We can see what it stands for. The San Juan. Yeah, come on. San Juan Resources Conservation and Development is a nonprofit organization that kind of serves as an umbrella agency for a lot of organizations in the region that don't have nonprofit status. It allows those organizations who are member participants to be able to apply for grants that have to be applied for by a nonprofit. Some things have happened over the years, and So they are wanting to come under the COGS umbrella, to have the COG primarily handle their bookkeeping and accounting. And so with a little bit more research, I would imagine that that's probably the job that the COG is going to be willing to assume. Miriam is pretty much of a go-getter, and she thinks that she can make it work and continue to have that option available. Without them in place, there are things that institutions and organizations in this area would not be eligible to apply for, so it's to everybody's advantage to be able to do that. And since that's a responsibility or a mission of the COG, is to be able to meet the needs of organizations in this region, it certainly fits well within the mission statement. So, and I believe that Miriam will be here in September to address the council in more detail about what the COG is. So, before we close, I would just like to remind folks that Third Thursday is this Thursday. Phil's going to be there.
You didn't know that, huh?
He knew. He volunteered. The Perseid meteor shower is tonight. This is the second and last night. It's in the northeast quadrant of the sky. So if you are out after you get home and it's going to be dark, you might want to check it out. It starts around 10 o'clock. And Bethany Turner, who is a rom-com author, is going to do a program at the library at 10 o'clock on Friday. So for anybody in the audience, it's free. Anything else for the good in the city?
I had one last thing. The George Gear Memorial Car Show is this Saturday, and we went to that, and it was just great. There's over 80 vehicles there, and hot rods, classic cars, weird-looking rat rods, and reconstructed farm machinery, and they had music and band and food, and it was hosted by the Blue Star Mothers, and it was very well attended again.
Wait, you said it's this weekend?
No, it was over. It was last Saturday.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You said this weekend, I'm like,
No, last weekend. Last Saturday. Yeah.
It was so good, we're having it again. I apologize, I forgot to tell you what happened at the workshop. We had a report by our library director, Rick Icanoy, about the Arts Committee projects. There is a facility that this committee has worked on. Mitchell Toms has very graciously allowed the Arts Committee to set up some artwork at 30 West Main. That's there. Is it right next to Stonefish? I can't remember exactly where on that strip of street that it's located, but anyway, it's where the old yoga shop used to be. Yeah, it'll give local artists a place to be able to display their work, and it will actually be for sale. So kudos to that work. Amy McAlpin came and talked about Montezuma Inspire Coalition, their progress. The organization received a $1.1 million grant to coordinate efforts among a variety of different local organizations to get kids out and doing outdoor activities, and they've been very successful. So she came to share that. We did have some discussion about the 7th Street extension, and we also had a discussion about the city participating in a feasibility study for a convention center, and John was going to follow up with the county on the conversation on that topic. And then we adjourned to executive session. So now, meeting's adjourned.